So, Britain 2.0. We're joined by these three professionals of the industry, of course. We have Ewen Stewart, and then Damian, absolutely, and then, of course, Cameron. So, I'd like to kick off by asking a very simple question. Ultimately, we speak a lot about technology, we talk a lot about innovation, and we've spoken about so much today. We've spoken about sovereignty, liberty, some of the unfortunate things that are happening to this great country. But the reality is, all of it really starts with economic growth. And I was wondering, perhaps, Ewen, could you give us a little bit of context? You know, where do you think we've gone wrong? What's some of the context with regards to where we are currently in Britain?
Well, where to start? I mean, 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, we'd been probably patting ourselves on the back. Britain was in the strongest position, I think, in Europe. We were a fairly free society. We were a fairly open society. There was the rule of law. Taxation was relatively low, not as good as in America, but relative to European countries, it was low. We had very low debt, 300 billion of debt accumulated since the Napoleonic Wars. And oh dear, despite extraordinary technological revolution that we're probably going to talk about a little bit later, every advantage we have has disappeared. We have got the highest taxes since 1948. Our debt, which over the last generation has increased tenfold to 3 trillion. And we are the global regulation central. We outdo the European Union, I think, on net zero, on financial services regulation, and we're catching up on employment regulation. So we've moved from being a really prosperous and successful part of the world to one stuck in the mud.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Damian, we were speaking a little bit earlier, obviously. What do you think, why do you think this is? I mean, I think everyone, when I first came to the UK in 2009, this was the place to be. London particularly was the place to be in the early 2000s. And then somehow we kind of lost our way. What are your thoughts on this?
You're right. I mean, we've certainly lost our way, and there's any one of a number of different reasons why that may be. But I think, you know, we seem to have been taken over, and I hate to repeat this phrase, but this, you know, Keynesian orthodoxy when it comes to monetary policy and, you know, larger state, more regulation, more involvement of the public sector and less private sector involvement. And that downfall really started back then in after Thatcher left, let's be honest, and Blair came into power. But so, yeah, we're talking 2 or 3 decades. And it just seems that we have this mentality from politicians of you know, across the board really, that we need to have a larger state, that we can provide everything for everyone. And the reality is that the government cannot and should not provide for everyone. It should not be a catch-all for people's bad decisions. And at the end of the day, the only way we are going to get out of this you know, situation, and it is a very dire situation the economy is in, as we mentioned earlier, is through growth. And you're only going to get growth through the private sector. You are not going to get growth, as we've seen, through an increase in the size of the state and the public sector, because the productivity is just simply not there.
Absolutely. And Cameron, obviously, I couldn't agree with you more, by the way. There is no point in talking about everything else unless we have actual growth. And it seems that the role of the government, which is predominantly to help manage a society, make sure that we're heading in the right direction, seems to be doing nothing but getting in the way. Cameron, obviously, we were talking a little bit about policy. We were obviously talking about currency. What do you think is the issue with regards to the UK policy and with regards to specifically the monetary policy in the UK?
Well, as Vladimir Lenin is credited with saying, if you want to break a capitalist system, you debauch the currency. Yeah. And so we've got 2 fundamental things we need for rebooting Britain. You need cheap, abundant energy. We'd all like low emissions energy, but nevertheless there are trade-offs with these things, and you can't not have the first 2 if you want to, you know, be able to fuel innovation in that, and even getting to better technologies, cleaner fuels, all that comes from innovation. And then the other thing is you need to measure it in something that's realistic and not just distorted arbitrarily by policymakers or, by Treasury and by government decision. So you need to have a monetary system that is anchored in some way to something, fundamental and measurable as an asset, something that just keeps it in reality. Otherwise, you kind of have a lot of maybe measured growth on paper, but it's actually all debt fueled. It's not real productivity and output that you're measuring. It just, on a spreadsheet, it looks bigger. Yeah. But in reality, it's not.
Yeah, and Damian, we were talking a little bit about infrastructure. Do you think that the UK infrastructure has what it needs to support this growth? Or is that one of the main reasons why we don't see growth and we're not able to reimagine ourselves into a Britain 2.0?
Well, no, you're right. I mean, we have a government and a country that just simply can't build things. Or when it does build things, it's incredibly expensive, over budget, years late. So we need to work out what is the root cause of why we cannot build things in this country. And one of the reasons will be the planning laws and the regulations, of course, and we've had lots of ridiculous examples of bat tunnels and HS2, 100 billion, years late. It's not going to make any return on its investment, probably never. So we need to look at the whole thing, and then we need to get more private money into the economy, and that's what's going to hopefully build the infrastructure that we need at a budget that is realistic and on a time frame that's realistic.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the interesting things that we've seen, obviously, from the Trump administration, especially in the early days, was Doge. I'm sure everyone here is obviously familiar with Doge. And the key point of Doge, of course, was to try to eliminate fraud, waste, and abuse. I was wondering, perhaps, Ewen, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that we're doing a good enough job in the UK in terms of getting to the bottom and making sure that if we look at it almost like a business, we are increasing the amount of money that's coming in, but we're also minimizing the bucket from where we're leaking?
The bang for the buck for the state is risable, absolutely risable. The British state spends 1.3 trillion a year. If you work that out, that is £44,000 for every family in the country. If we were to take a straw poll of this room, would we say we were getting good value for that £44,000? I don't see many hands in the air. I certainly wouldn't put my own hand up. Of course, I'm not an anarchist. I believe there's a role for the state. But when this country was at its zenith, the state was 10% of GDP on a good day. It's 44% of GDP today. And exactly what are we getting? That second-rate health, second-rate education, and a Royal Navy that isn't anywhere to be seen. So it is not a question. We're about to have a new Prime Minister that no doubt will find cruel and new unusual taxes to extract from us further. It is not a question about raising more money. It's about spending what they spend in a half-decent fashion. From the Office of National Statistics' own statistics, the productivity in the public sector is lower than 1997. The internet hardly existed in 1997. There wasn't a digital economy in 97. What are they doing? It's utterly pathetic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And who here in the audience is excited about the new announcements of Andy Burnham? Is anyone here excited about it? No, I know I'm certainly not excited about it. I'm actually quite concerned. We're getting a nice, cushy person that we're putting in place of our dear current Prime Minister, and I'm not too sure the next one is any better. So, Cameron, just on that point, obviously, our dear friend Ewen was mentioning a lot of great things here. What are your thoughts on what he was saying?
Yeah, I mean, the whole system doesn't have accountability and transparency, and that's what it needs, and you need systems to have that. So again, your monetary unit needs to be accountable to something, and there needs to be transparency around the spending that government is doing and what are we getting for this. And maybe
give the audience a little understanding, because obviously we're talking about the role of currency. And one of the great things is, what is actually the current state of affairs? I know most of the people who are perhaps a little bit older, understand the current problem with currencies and it being tied to assets. But perhaps just walk us down memory lane a little bit, just to give us some context on where we are right now.
Right. Well, the nature of money, I mean, it started out that you could very clearly see what the asset was and who it belonged to. And that's because people would actually hold on their person, you know, whether it's gold or silver or tobacco, whatever it was. And then with the banking system, you actually started having a paper promise where it's redeemable for a real asset, but you no longer own the asset, which is quite an important legal distinction, which is why you get caught in runs on the bank and things like this, and you find out you don't have any rights. And then we sort of moved, after 71, we actually came off the gold standard, or the US dollar did, and there were some other currencies pegged to that. So that was the last break, if you like, the last link, I should say, with reality, something real, something that meant that you couldn't just, you know, magic up money. You know, you had to have the gold at least at a ratio of about 40%, I think it was at the time. And so since then, we've had government issuing a monetary product, which is, you know, just the national currency, that's unrestrained. And they don't, you know, it's not a promise to deliver anything. It's a promise for nothing. It's a promise for the same thing that you just got, which makes it a circular promise and completely useless.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. And obviously don't want to make everyone super depressed here today. We've all highlighted the issues. Cameron, turning the tone a little bit, looking at things a little bit more positively. Obviously, we are looking at a Britain 2.0. What do you think are some of the solutions? What do you think are some of the things that the government should be doing? But what do you think are some of the things that perhaps people here today could also be doing in their own personal lives? And then maybe we'll share around the question as well.
Well, yeah, great question. I mean, the reality is that we do need a radical reset in this country, and that's not just politically, it's economically, it's monetary, and it's societal as well. As I said earlier, we have a society that has become dependent, if you like, on the state, and we need to move away from that model. So work should always pay, and we should put the incentives in place through the tax system to reward the wealth creators in this country, the risk takers, the entrepreneurs, because those are the people that are going to bring in growth, which we desperately need. Just coming back to the debt situation, you can have a country with a large national debt. You know, we have 3 trillion of debt in this country. That's not necessarily a problem if you have growth. The problem the UK has is that we don't have any growth, and we haven't for the last 20 years, and that's the issue. So, as we said earlier, we need to get back to policies through the government, through supply-side reforms, that is going to drive growth. And part of the way you do that is that you reward hard work and risk takers.
Absolutely. And Ewen, we were having a little chat about, funny enough, hunting, out of all things just now. How do we make sure we hit on target? How do we make sure that we get to a point where we can actually stimulate growth and get on the other side of where we are right now?
You know, we live in a world that is truly extraordinary. A world where technology, which none of us could have dreamt of 10 or 15 years ago, is now commonplace. The man from Mars arriving here would say that we should be living in milk and honey. We should be benefiting from this enormous innovation. And the question is, why are we not? And I think the answer, and this has been a thread in many of the speeches here over the last few days, and it's very much as much a moral and a cultural problem as much as an economic problem. But it is the state does not trust you and it does not trust me, and they have centralized. I don't think it is the role of the state to say we should invest in this area or that area. That's for you to choose. But what the state can do is to create an architecture. That architecture is certainty. It's providing cheap power, which we should be able to do in abundance in this land. It is about providing rules and the rule of law for us all to prosper. So it is not about picking winners. My goodness, the private sector in America and elsewhere has created wonders untold. It's government that has wrecked it, and we need to just create that architecture to let you unleash the future. We did it in the past, and we can do it again.
Well said. Well said. Well said. Absolutely. In my own personal experience, I must say, whenever you try to coordinate things too much, that's when you stifle innovation and you don't let people have, one, the ability to pursue things in perhaps a different direction that could lead to wonderful things. But I think at the heart of it sits this almost perverse idea of what entrepreneurs and what innovation are. It's almost like now they are the devil. They are the bad ones. Anyone who can accumulate capital has to be punished. Cameron, what are your thoughts? Obviously, you work a lot with gold being a key asset that people obviously look to store. Do you think that we're heading in the right direction with regards to this? And what can we do to create an entrepreneurial culture?
Yeah, the cultural bit's a really good point, and as Damian was sort of saying, it's, you know, what type of society do we want to be? One of the things I'm sure most people in this room would find, you know, of late, is that like up is down, left is right. Somebody who works hard and intelligently and sacrifices and accumulates wealth for themselves and their family, who creates jobs and opportunity in society for others, somehow they're the bad guy. And the person who's controlling the purse strings, who hasn't earned any of that, but they find themselves in this position of massive power, who certainly doesn't have the skills to make any decisions on what's investable, on where's a good, you know, trend of an industry going. You know, they're the ones that somehow they're the virtuous moral ones. It's ridiculous. And you know, again, it's just. It's pretty simple stuff, like it's the accountability and transparency thing. I think fiat money is the root of all evil. It's been going for over 50 years now. It's an economic experiment. Do you actually need your money grounded in reality? Yeah. And this is why we live in this kind of non-reality now. I
mean, I was going to say, inflation just over the last 10 years, 10, 15 years is crazy.
Yeah.
You know, most people that would have saved up, I mean, look at house prices, look at everything, look at salaries that haven't grown. How can you possibly have an economy that can keep up with that?
Yeah, and it also creates a massive divide between the haves and the have-nots. Because if you've got some assets, like a house or something, you've actually seen that go up in tremendous value over the last since the turn of the century. It's not going up really in value, because if you move to a better house, it's going to be relatively cost you more. Your house has gone up. Makes you feel like maybe I could go into a bit more debt, so maybe have that more expensive holiday, maybe stop that sort of self-sacrificing, you know, savers mindset, and that's not good for people's financial well-being. But it's funny, that inflation makes people with assets feel good, and it's only when, you know, your shopping's going up 20% a year at the supermarket, and then everyone goes, isn't inflation terrible? And it's like, you know, that's just the same effect that's going on here in these assets.
Yeah, well, in the US, we had this whole thing about the eggs, didn't we? There's the price of eggs. That's what Trump was really working on, the price of eggs. But no, absolutely. Cameron, obviously you wanted to say something.
I was just going to say that, you know, this is where Gary Stevenson, you know, is getting things wrong, and he gets a lot of things wrong. But inequality and trying to reduce inequality, that's a good thing, and, you know, very laudable, fantastic. Wealth taxes are not the solution to that. And coming back to what you were saying about asset prices, you know, that was not due to millionaires or billionaires. It wasn't really down to government policy. You know, that was monetary policy. You know, we had a massive expansion of the monetary supply through quantitative easing. The whole point of QE was to raise asset prices. That was the point. And it was to create inflation, which is why the Bank of England made a terrible mistake in 2021, because by doing QE, 450 billion in 2021-22, it increased inflation all the way up to 11.2%.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Ewen, if we can finish with you, perhaps, we've spoken a lot about all these wonderful tools that are coming about with regards to digital innovation, technology, but an economy is made of so much more. I know, of course, we said already, you're originally from Scotland. I spent some time in Scotland myself. Do you think that the only way to get us to economic growth is by embracing those new technologies, or is there innovation that can happen across areas, more traditional jobs, let's say?
I think it's a balance, isn't it? There's no doubt that the UK and Europe have fallen behind America and to an extent China in terms of AI, and that is a concern. There's no doubt about that. But actually, there's a lot of countries in much worse state than Britain have recovered. I mean, if we look at Poland, for example, you just had the excellent previous Prime Minister of Poland presenting to you a little earlier. Poland 30 years ago, and I'm sure you'd probably agree with this, was a basket case. It was a smokestack industry basket case. Within 10 years, Polish GDP per head will be higher than this country. If anyone had said that could happen 20 years ago, you'd have been laughed out of court. We've got great assets in this country, actually. We've got the English language is a huge strategic advantage. The City of London is still in a strong position despite massive regulation. The cultural assets, we might have lost a football match the other night, but the English Premier League is a huge asset.
Good.
F1, I could roll on, you might say, so what? But these are important assets. So the UK can recover, but it's got to do it based on trusting the people and coming up with, there's never been a better opportunity to set up businesses than now. The internet allows you to go out to the world.
Wonderful.
What is stopping it is our government.
Great.